Hi, welcome to the Gemara on Yotet Amud Aleph. We're starting from the Gemara that immediately follows the Mishnah. The Mishnah, which we'll be talking about the first part of, begins with these rules about what happens when someone travels on Purim. You can look at it yourself and remind yourself, but the two categories we're dealing with in the Mishnah are someone who lives in a city and goes to a walled city, and someone who lives in a walled city who goes to an unwalled city. And the Gemara says that when they keep Purim, when they read Megillah specifically, depends on whether or not they are planning on returning to the place they came from. If they have intent, atid lachzor limkomo is the phrase that the Mishnah uses. Amar Rava, lo shanu ela she'atid lachzor b'leila yudalad. Aval ein atid lachzor b'leila arba'asar, korei mahen. So Rava says, this was only taught about a case where the person is planning to go back on the night of the 14th of Adar. But if they're not planning to go back on the night of the 14th of Adar, then they read with them, meaning with the place that they are. So in other words, Rava is defining the words in the Mishnah more narrowly. He says that atid lachzor, planning to go back to the place you came from, but that's only if you're going to go back the 14th at night. If you're going to stay further into Purim, right, past the 14th at night, then you read like the place where you are, not like the place where you came from. Let's read the Rashis here to help us understand. So Rashi, first of all, says, Lo shanu, right, this was only taught, the beginning of Rava's statement. Lo shanu de ben krach shehalach la'ir va'atid lachzor limkomo koreh b'chamisha asar v'lo b'arba asar. So the only case in which, for example, a ben krach, someone from a walled city, who goes to a city and is planning on going back to the place they came from, so they only read on the 15th and not the 14th if they're planning on going back the 14th at night. So again, she travels to the city on the 13th, if she's to the unwalled city on the 14th. If she is going back the 14th at night, even though Purim has already started in the unwalled city, then she's going to plan to read Megillah with her hometown on the 15th. But if she's staying past the night of the 14th into the morning of the 14th, then she reads on the 14th with the unwalled city. Going on in Rashi, El she'atid lachzor b'leil arba'asar, Im kodem amud hashachar yatsa min ha'ir hu dekatani she'ino tzarich likroti mahen b'leila yodalad. So if she leaves the city before sunrise, before dawn, then that's the case in which she does not need to read with the place where she is. Meaning she leaves before dawn on the night of the 14th. So it's not yet quite the morning of the 14th. Even though she's still there at night, right? So Purim has actually started that night in that city, because unwalled cities celebrate Purim on the 14th. Purim's actually started. Even though she's there, since she's not staying through the morning of the 14th, she doesn't even get the status of Paruz ben Yomo, of being a member of an unwalled city for that one day. And going on in Rashi, Aval ein atid, in the flip case, she's not planning on leaving before daybreak. So that's what Rashi tells you. Aval ein atid latzet misham balayla, she's not going back at night. Tahashte have a paruz la'oto yom. So if you're staying through daybreak on the 14th, again, because night comes before day, if you're staying through daybreak on the 14th, then you get the status of paruz for a day. Afal pisha atid lachzor lemachar, liyom, it should be liyom echad, nikra paruz, right? So just being there for one day gives you paruz status, v'korei mahen. And then you read with the place where you are, which is the unwalled city, ben b'leila yudalad, ben b'yudalad, both the nighttime reading and the daytime reading of the 14th. V'hu hadin leben ir shahalach lekrach, and same deal vice versa for the person from the unwalled city who goes to the walled city. Imati lachzor b'leila tetvav, shelo yehesham b'tetvav, lo have mukaf liyoma, v'korei b'yudalad kechovat mikoma. So the person from the unwalled city who goes to the walled city, if he's going to go back to his unwalled city on the night of the 15th and isn't going to be there during the day on the 15th, then he doesn't get the mukaf for a day status. And so then he reads on the 14th like the place where he came from, even though, parenthetically, he's in a place where no one else is reading on the 14th. The afal pishu bekrach, even though he's in the walled city, again, no one else does that. Aval ena tidlach zor b'leilei tetvav, ein tzarich likrota b'yud daled. Sorry, this should be the afal pishu bekrach, period. Right? But if he's not going back on the night of the 15th, meaning he's going back before the morning of the 15th, he's not going back before the morning on the 15th, and he's staying through the morning of the 15th. Ein tzarich likrota b'yud daled, umamtin v'korei mahen, afal pishu sofo lachzor la'achar zman. So again, that's as complicated as it gets here. That's the end of it, but Rava basically says only if you're there for the full day into the morning of Purim day do you acquire the status of the place where you are as opposed to the place you came from. Amar Rava, mina aminala. So Rava says, from where do I know this? Meaning, Rashi tells us, Demishum hahu yom achashiv kavatayu. How do I know that one day is enough to make him or her considered like the new place instead of like the place where they came from? How do we know that one day is enough? Tichtiv, al ken haYehudim haprazim. Al ken haYehudim haprazim hayoshvim ba'arei haprazot. Because it talks about the Jews of the unwalled cities who live in the unwalled cities. Michde ktiv haYehudim haprazim. Since it says haYehudim haprazim, it gives us that phrase. Lama li lemichtav hayoshvim ba'arei haprazot. Why do I need it to say hayoshvim ba'arei haprazot? Isn't the pasuk redundant? Hakamashboan to paruz ben yomo nikra paruz. So this teaches us that a paruz for a day is considered a paruz. You only have to be in an unwalled city for one day, okay, at least for that one day of, into the day of Purim, in order to be counted as a member of an unwalled city and to have your Purim obligation be on the 14th, even though you come from a walled city. Ashkechan paruz, mukaf minalan. So we found paruz, but how do we know about someone who's from a walled city? In other words, you explained to me why someone who goes to an unwalled city is considered like a member of the unwalled city, because the proof text is about unwalled cities. But what about mukaf? What about a walled city? Svarahu, it's logical, it's logic. It means a paruz ben yomo karui paruz, mukaf ben yomo karui mukaf. If you can be considered a member of an unwalled city by being there for one day, then you can be considered a member of a walled city by being there for one day. Ve'amar Rava, another statement of Rava, ben kfar shehalach le'ir, ben kach u'ben kach korei mahen. A ben kfar, someone from a village who went to a city, either way reads with them, meaning reads with the place that they've gone to. So let's look at Rashi here. Ben kfar, right, someone who lives in a village. Rashi gives you the background that you might remember from the first parak. Shehiktim v'kara yom haknisa. Generally speaking, someone who lives in a village can read earlier on the Yom HaKnisa. V'achar kach halach le'ir, v'haya sham leila yudad. This is a person who actually read early. This person already read on the Yom HaKnisa, on let's say it was the Monday that preceded Purim. But after that, she went to the city, and that's where she's going to be on the 14th. So even though she already read, but she's a ben kfar, ben kach u'ben kach, either way, Rashi says, "Afilu atid lachzor v'latzeit misham kodem hayom korei mahen b'layla." Even if she's not going to actually stay in the city for a full day, it's a different rule than the previous case. She's going back that day. She still reads on the 14th. My tama. What's the reason? Hai kibnei ha'ir ba'ay lemikre. This person is actually required to read on the same day as the members of the city. V'rabanan hu da'akil ha'kfarim kedei sheyisapku mayim u'mazon l'chahem shebekrachim. And the rabbis were just lenient on the villages to let them, so that they'd be able to bring food and water to those who were in the cities. But in fact, the ikar of their chiyuv, their obligation for Purim, really should be technically on the 14th. Hani mile, these words meaning this heter to read early, ki ite bedukte. That's when they are in their place, or when he is in his place, meaning in the village. Aval ki ite be'ir, kibnei ha'ir ba'ay lemikre. But when the person's in the city, then they have to read like the city does. The special heter of reading early actually only applies when you're actually from the village and you're in the village. Eitzvei abaye, Abaye brings a contradiction. Ben krach shehalach le'ir, someone from a walled city who goes to an unwalled city. Ben kach uben kach korek kimkomo. Someone from a walled city who goes to a city, either way reads like the place where he's from, kimkomo, which totally goes against what we've seen before, right? It goes against Rava's interpretation of the Mishnah. And it because the ben kach or ben kach, right? It should be dependent on whether you're going back when you're going back. It doesn't make sense. So ben krach salkazatach, be'imati lachzor talya milta. Could this really be a correct statement about a ben krach? Like it goes against our previous statement about a ben krach. For a ben krach, it's dependent on literally be'imati lachzor talya milta. The thing is dependent. Talya milta means the thing is dependent on whether or not you're going back. So Abaye's statement completely doesn't match up with Rava's statement. So we're going to fix it. Elalav ben kfar. Rather not. We actually are talking about a ben kfar, right? That makes it match. That's a better match for the subsequent statement, right? That actually with a ben kfar, then it is. It is not dependent on whether the person is going back or not. So that makes it a little bit easier. It has to refer to a ben kfar. And v'lav tirutzi mitaratzat tani korei mahen. And this isn't an answer. This isn't correct. And in fact, tani korei mahen. You have to read it as korei mahen. He reads with them. So in other words, you have to correct both parts of this statement, right? Lav tirutzi mitaratzat means it's still not correct. Tani korei mahen. Right? Even if you fix this phrase, ben krach, and change it to ben kfar, it's still not the case that the ben kfar reads kimkomo, like his place. Actually, he reads imahen. So we change both parts, and now Abaye's statement matches Rava's second statement, this one, ben kfar shehalach le'ir, etc. And we fix the problem. And that's the end of this piece of Gemara.